Hey everybody, so it's that time again, and it's March now, and my hope is that both on the Japan immigration front and more broadly as a human species, that while this March has sort of come in like a lion, it will go out like a lamb, as the old saying goes. And I wanted to start, and really, I guess the theme of this video is going to be hope, because I feel like this has been a really pessimistic period in so many of our lives, both because we're locked out of Japan and because of the fucking global pandemic. And I think that there are a lot of genuine reasons to be hopeful right now. I'll start more generally, and then I'll get in more specifically with travel restrictions around the world, and then why I am hopeful about Japan going forward and why I'm not. And it's going to be a little bit complicated. This is kind of a long video, which is why I am not walking today. I'm inside my home in Kyoto. Well, it's not my home, I'm renting it, but at the place where I'm living here. I want to be some more comfortable because this is going to be kind of a long one. But in terms of the hope, I mean, with very few exceptions around the world, the pandemic has started to recede, okay? And I know we've been here before, after each of the previous surges, but this time is different. First of all, the extent to which cases, hospitalizations, and deaths have come down just about everywhere in the world. Again, there are exceptions: Central and Eastern Europe, Brazil. India is seeing a mild uptick, but that could just be due to more testing, because their testing has always been terrible there for a country of 1.3 billion people. But at any rate, the main difference now is that we have incredible vaccines. And in addition to the fact that qualitatively these vaccines are incredible, the supply of them is increasing very rapidly, to the extent that, at least in developed countries, we are soon going to have more vaccines than arms to put them into. So I do think that in many parts of the world, even if there were to be a fourth surge, and again, I'm not convinced there's going to be, because so many places that have been hard hit also have some natural level of population immunity now, we have this other weapon, which are these incredible vaccines, which they don't always prevent disease from occurring, infection from occurring. They're not 100% effective, but one thing they have been effective at, which I don't think a lot of people realize when they see these efficacy numbers that focus on whether or not someone can get or transmit the disease, is that they have prevented severe disease and death in 100% of cases, including with all these variants that I always told you were going to be a nothing burger. So in terms of the pandemic situation, I think there's legitimate reason to be hopeful that we are entering the final stretch. There's not just light at the end of the tunnel, that light is coming like deep into the tunnel now. And I think we can all cautiously start to take a breath now. In terms of travel restrictions, given that Japan is such a hopeless abyss on this topic, I look elsewhere, and I sort of use that as a barometer for the global feeling. Because I guess, broadly speaking, what I think is going to happen, again, separating Japan out from this for a second, I think that there's going to reach a point in the pandemic where, regardless of the number of infections that occur around the world every day, there's going to be such little severe illness and death that there's not going to be the political will to have restrictions on daily life, be it travel bans, lockdowns, social distancing, mask mandates, whatever. You're already seeing this happen in many parts of the US, in Europe, and I think this is just going to intensify. And in particular regard to travel restrictions, there are two places that I'm looking that give me some hope. Three places really, but we're going to start with two places. The first is my former home of Taiwan, which, in spite of the fact that they never implemented a lockdown and really haven't had a very draconian response, they did fully shut their border almost a year ago. And they, as of March 1st, have reverted to their pre-variant border policy in December, which is basically that anybody who isn't a tourist can enter, as long as they quarantine for between 5 and 14 days, depending on where they come from. And to me, Taiwan is like pretty much the most science-based nation in the world. I think being a sort of pariah nation diplomatically due to China right next door, it's kind of almost see it as like the Israel of the East. they don't have the luxury of being able to make decisions based off of politics and whatever the political mood du jour is. They have to make their decisions based off facts. And I see the fact that they have relaxed their border policy, which basically locked out all non-resident foreigners since January. I see that as a reflection that we're going to start moving in the other direction in other countries. The second one, and this might surprise some of you because I have not necessarily had kind words for this country throughout the pandemic, is Australia. It's not on a federal level in Australia, granted, but Gladys Berejiklian, who is the Premier of New South Wales, which is the most populous state of Australia, it's where Sydney is, has come out and said that the way Australia manages and looks at COVID is not sustainable. This whole zero COVID, zero cases as vaccines come online is not sustainable. And she specifically called attention to the fact that Australia needs to reconnect with the world, that these travel bans are not sustainable. And she didn't even stop where most Australian politicians do, which is the fact that Australian citizens mostly can't come home right now, which is totally ridiculous and is a separate conversation. But she seems to be talking about more general travel for students, for leisure travelers, whatever, getting back to normal. And she specifically said that as vaccines come online, we need to stop focusing so much on cases and focus more on hospitalization, severe illness, and death. And that really needs to be the metric. So I guess I'm using this as a barometer that if someone from a country as conservative as that, when it comes to COVID policy, is starting to see the light that we've all been seeing this whole time, I think that means the mood is shifting worldwide. And I think the reason the mood is shifting is because of the tangible reasons I talked about earlier. Now, let's put Japan in the hot seat, which is why you were all here. So I think the most immediate concern that most of you have, I do have some workers on here and some Love is Not Tourism people, but there are a lot of students who are concerned that they're not going to be able to enter before April 1st, which of course is when the semester begins. And the bad news is that tangibly, I don't have any updates on this. The government has been really quiet about this. I don't really think anybody's asked Motegi about this or any of the other officials, the justice minister or the people at MEXT. I think a lot of the universities have been very mum. Some of the larger ones, I think Waseda, they're insisting on online-only instruction to at least September. I guess they have plenty of money. But the thing is, from a business perspective, for a lot of these small and medium-sized schools, like ISI here in Kyoto, where I go, it would make sense to want to get the students in the country by April 1st. Certainly, for this intake period, which is going to be the largest of the entire year. Because I think some students will be fine learning Japanese or going to university in Japan online. I sure wouldn't. I mean, I always said that if I hadn't been able to get in at the end of December like I did, I would have just canceled and moved on because I'm not paying thousands of dollars to study a foreign language in a computer. Like, I'm here to be immersed. So on one hand, it would make a lot of sense for them to open the border at least back to where it was in December, sort of like Taiwan has just done, by the end of March. On the other hand, Japan has not really operated from a place of logic or sense right now. What compounds this fact is that the government has tied the travel restrictions to the maintenance of the state of emergency, which thankfully has been lifted here in Kyoto where I live. It's lifted in Kyoto, Osaka, Fukuoka. I think it was in Hyogo, Gifu, Nagoya, Aichi, somewhere else. I don't remember where it was, but basically it's been lifted everywhere except the Tokyo region, and then it's been extended there for 2 weeks until the 21st. So this is March 6th today. It was supposed to end March 7th, and now it's been extended 2 weeks to the 21st. So assuming that travel restrictions lift the moment that is lifted, which is definitely up in the air, that would give those of you wanting to enter for April about a week of notice, which is the same as I had coming in for January. So I can empathize on that. But I'm not really sure what's going to play out with that. One reason a lot of students and workers who are locked out are mad, and I totally agree with them on this, is that the Japanese government has begun talking about allowing Olympic athletes to start entering without quarantine. and without even a recommendation for vaccination, let alone a mandate, which, spoiler alert, I don't know. I know that opinions are mixed about vaccine passports and requiring vaccination to travel, but like if that allows travel to get unlocked more in the short term, I'm all for it. And let's be honest, like competing in the Olympics is a privilege, not a right. Like I think it would be totally within the rights of the Japanese government to say, look, no vaccine, no competition, because that's the best way to prevent a large-scale outbreak and the cancellation of the games in mid-sprint, to use a sports analogy, due to disease. But anyway, yeah, so they're thinking about allowing in athletes quarantine-free, which is completely ridiculous. And then there is the parallel conversation that is sort of being telegraphed in the media that foreign spectators aren't going to be allowed in. And I've been really outspoken about this. So in my opinion, there are a lot of reasons the Olympics should be canceled. But like, if there are no foreign spectators, if it's a Japanese-only Olympics, as some far-right Japanese politicians have waxed poetic about, it's not an Olympics at all. It needs to fucking be canceled. Like, that's an embarrassment. This idea that the entire reason for hosting the games at this point, according to the organizers, to the Japanese government, in spite of the strong local and even global opposition to them, is that it is supposed to signify humanity's defeat of the pandemic. Newsflash. If all of humanity isn't welcome to come in and watch the games in person, then this is nothing more than an admission of defeat. It is humiliating. Like, I don't see what Japan gains by having what is ostensibly, with the exception of the athletes, a domestic sports event a year delayed from what Tokyo 2020 was supposed to be, and basically have it be a virtual extravaganza. I don't know. You know, I've been pretty outspoken also about the fact that I think the best way to remedy this is to cancel Beijing 2022 to punish China, not only for the coronavirus, which of course did come from Wuhan, but also for the genocide of the Uyghurs. Move Tokyo 2020 for the last time to summer of 2022, and then, as a cherry on top of this shit cake, make China pay Japan for all of the postponement costs. I think that would make everyone happy. It would eliminate all the fuck shit that's going to happen if Tokyo 2020 is held this July. And it would save the Japanese government from having to be such assholes right now about the immigration policy when it's keeping romantic partners, students, and workers out of the country, to say nothing of the fact that eventually they're going to have to welcome tourists back in, but then rolling out the red carpet for Olympic athletes who are not going to have to quarantine and also don't need to be vaccinated. It makes absolutely no sense. In terms of organized efforts to sort of force the Japanese government's hand, I have to say there haven't been as many this time as there were in the autumn before the residence track was established. There is one student organization on Twitter that's recently been organizing. I'll link them in the description of this video. And then this isn't so much an effort as it is a study. There was a Belgian professor, I think, I don't remember who he was, but he created this pretty lengthy Google survey to ask people if they've been affected by the Japan travel ban, to what extent, how it has changed or ruined their lives. And if that survey is still live, I might link to that in the description as well, but don't hold me to that because that was a few days ago and it might not be up anymore. But yeah, so the Olympic thing is totally unacceptable, and I totally understand why everyone is upset about that. But I think if we zoom out a little bit more broadly, I think the other issue that the Japanese government has right now, and this is not exclusive to the Japanese government, most countries in the world are this way right now, is a sort of lack of bold and imaginative thinking. Because I think during the really acute phase of the pandemic, it was understandable how this would be approached as a once-in-a-century emergency. And, you know, it's basically the goal of the response is just to stop the bleeding. But, like, the bleeding has been stopped right now, right? Even if we were to experience a fourth surge, like, we know what to do to control this disease. And to say nothing of the fabulous vaccines we now have. And, you know, shame on you, Japanese government, for not ordering enough for your population. That's another topic. But I think that there right now, leaders of the world need to focus not on stopping the bleeding, not on a Band-Aid approach, but really imagining what the post-COVID world is going to be like. Getting back not to a new normal in the sense of that it's going to be some Frankenstein pandemic, everyone wears 10 masks for the rest of eternity normal, but a version of where the world would have been in 2021 and 2022 had this never happened. We need to, with regard to travel restrictions, look at not travel bubbles and shortened quarantine periods and all these half measures that are not really going to make a difference except to make it look like politicians have actually done something, but how we're going to reconnect the world in a meaningful way. We need global standardized testing, for example. We do need some kind of vaccine passport in the short term because, again, there are issues around the equity of requiring vaccines when not everyone in the world has access to them, but there has to be a first step, and it has to be a meaningful step. It has to be a step that allows people to travel in large numbers without quarantine, without restrictions that are going to prevent humanity from reconnecting. And I think, again, Japan, and I've said this the whole time, if they want to hold the Olympics this summer with without spectators, it needs to be canceled. But if I was in charge of the Japanese government, I would say, no, we are going to have spectators. We're going to have a full Olympics. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use our scientific and technological prowess, and we are going to pioneer a system that allows for a safe restart of global travel. And I think the lack of imagination in this department is so detrimental because I think that it directly ties to the lack of hope and despondency that so many people have been feeling during this time. Because I also think of it this way. The job of national and local and state and provincial leaders is, again, in the time of the emergency, I get it. They have to stop the bleeding. But leadership is not about managing a crisis. It's not about managed decline, to use a term that a lot of people ascribe to what's going on with my country the past decade or so. It's about taking bold, decisive action that might piss off some people, action that a lot of people might think is wrong, but to have a vision for the future, to lead your people in that direction, and to take actions that are going to manifest that future into reality. And I think that we have a real crisis of this in the world right now. And then that's compounded by the fact that you have, maniac experts that have been unleashed that, maybe for nefarious reasons, maybe for wholly human ones, that they want their 15 minutes of fame to last. They don't want this to end. They want the world to be in a state of medical crisis forever. And it's like, no, we need bigger thinking on this. We need to figure out how is humanity, there's that 90s film, How Stella Got Her Groove Back. How is humanity going to get its groove back, right? How are we going to get the joy back in our lives? How are we going to restore the freedom of movement? We need to start thinking about these questions because, again, I know this is the 5th time I've said it in the video, but with these fabulous vaccines that all but neuter COVID-19, we have reason to hope, and we have, I would say, almost an obligation to get back to some semblance of the reality that we used to live in. And so I guess, wow, I've talked a long time. I guess I feel bad that I don't have more tangible information for you, specifically with regard to Japan, about what's going to happen over the next couple weeks, or what I think is going to happen over the next couple weeks. But I guess I do feel the tide is turning globally. I feel like there is a abundance of hope now that I haven't seen in basically a year since all this started. I think there's reason for that hope. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say. And I say this also, I wanted to make this clear, without invalidating any of the pain or the anger or the frustration that so many of you feel. Because listen, this is where I was for basically all of 2020. I totally get it. I understand it. Your pain is valid. It's real. It is justified. And you can be as upset as you want to be, and you have every reason to be, and I stand with you, and I hold your hand in your discomfort and your discontent, and your desire to hold people accountable. But the tide is going to turn sooner rather than later. I will say that. And I'll end this video because, again, it's been almost 20 minutes. I'll end this video on a personal note by saying that I so appreciate those of you who have left comments, both here on YouTube, social media, email, and reached out to me. I know that in a lot of cases, I haven't probably been able to provide as specific of information or guidance or advice as you've been looking for rather. But I hope that what I have said has brought you hope and has, kept you going for another day at this hopeless and ambiguous time. And for you haters, because there have been some haters, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, a hater is a fan, so thank you for your fandom. Number two, I only speak the truth on this channel, right? Everything that I say is backed up by science, by facts, by common sense in some cases, which some of you motherfuckers seem to lack. And just because you don't like something doesn't mean it isn't true. And the thing is that, again, as this hope builds around the world and the conversation changes and COVID gets defanged and fades into the background, the court of public opinion is going to back up the cases that I've been making that would win in any court of law. So some of y'all need to sit your asses down. There was this guy on Twitter, this castle expert from Scotland, who tried to dox me because I rightfully pointed out that Scotland's entire COVID policy, particularly as it relates to travel, is absolutely insane. And it is. I don't just talk about Japan, by the way. On my main site, Leave Your Daily How, I have lots of updates on the travel restrictions around the world. But anyway, he's some Nicholas Sturgeon fanboy, and he got his panties in a wad, and he was so offensive. He tried to cancel me because I was, or he tried to dox me, rather, and get me canceled because I was putting people's lives in danger. You know what? It's ironic that he's a castle expert because he's one of these privileged champagne socialist people who probably in his own private life is doing whatever the fuck he wants, but he wants other people to stay home and save lives while he sits in his mansion, his castle, whatever, and feels morally superior to the rest of us. And, you swung and you missed. So if you're watching this, try harder next time. But anyway, that's a bit of a longer tangent than I wanted. I thank all of you for watching. I hope that by April I have lots more positive news for you. I do think the tide is very slowly turning, and I look forward to not needing to make these videos anymore and being able to make more fun content and inspiring content for all of you once you're in Japan. So hope you're doing well. Happy March. See you in April. And yeah, all right, bye.